I'm Tyler Edlin, and welcome to the second Brush Sauce Theater Community Contest. And for this mock-up brief, it was looking for a dragon shrine. This shrine is located beyond the reach of man, somewhere on an island in the middle of the ocean. Here, the Draconian clan performs a ritual sacrifice once every 50 years to strengthen the seal over the Forbidden One. This can be an exterior or interior shot. The shrine itself is built from massive chunks of ancient technology. It's filled with tall hallways and wide rooms with space broken up by pillars, statues, and water flowing. Perhaps manuscripts with engravings and motifs lit by flame are lit throughout the ceremonial hall. Bits of the planet have taken back some of the areas less maintained, so rock and exotic plant life are sprinkled throughout. Now, this isn't, when I said that's the description, that's not necessarily set in stone. It's just to kind of push everyone's ideas to kind of go forward in more or less one direction, so everyone kind of aims for the same thing. Alright everyone, before we begin this month, I'd like to introduce special guest judge Adam Duff, who's here with me, and as you can see, he's an accomplished artist and educator. I believe he has a background in animation as well too, so it'll be great to have his insight on board this month. Here are the entries, anyway.
All right. This is all your stuff here.
Yeah, this is all the entries.
Okay.
Some of them have been done by the same person, so actually 6 of them were. But so let's talk about more like on the art side, what works and what doesn't work with these, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I'll do it in standard form. I guess I'll start on the top left.
Yeah, let's start right here.
Okay. Well, this is really nice stuff.
I like the mood and the composition on this one a lot.
I like the mood and the composition, definitely. The color is very nice use of color and atmosphere.
Yeah, and the focal point's working well too.
Yeah.
Everything about this image is very clear and concise.
Yeah, it's very clear and concise. I like first I'll point out the things that I like here. Not to be diplomatic, just saying I'm dyslexic, so I like to separate things into categories. Okay, what do I like about this? Well, I love the atmosphere. I love the way the eye kind of pulls off into the top left. Gives a nice sense of depth. It helps those foreground characters pop a little bit better. The composition is nice. There's a very clear focal point. Let me see. The design is nicely done too. I like the fact that everything, it's cohesive. It's not kind of a mix and match of different ideas. It really fits into a nice theme. There's a good narrative going on.
It's a good illustration.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let me see. Overall, I'd say this is a strong image. It's definitely a strong image. It's got a good catch to it as well. Like if I was on my way to Subway sandwiches or something like that, and I was passing by a gallery, this is probably the one I would grab first out of the lot, just because there's a nice use of contrast.
The designs are really nice up on the statues up here, and then there's a real good sense of a narrative element. He's got an executioner. There's an animal on a pit here.
Yeah, absolutely. Where there's an animal? Where? Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that.
It's bleeding out too.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, let me get a little bit picky with this. I'm not trying to be brutal or anything. I'm just, I'm being honest because this is a growth process, of course. Okay. If I stand back, the first thing that I always go with my intuition. My intuition is thinking, I'm finding that the characters, like the characters at the bottom, the army, so to speak, if you think in terms of tempo. When I say tempo, I mean spacing between different objects, okay? Spacing between the different characters. It's a bit redundant in that sense.
Too even?
Okay? So if you were to, like, the spacing between those, like the 4 main ones that I would see, there's the 3 that are the darkest blue, but you have that one that's a bit faded into the red.
Yeah.
But it's a bit too boop, 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 boop. The rhythm is a little bit too redundant.
Yeah.
What I would be tempted to do to give it a little bit more visual variety is to space them a little bit more randomly. Have 2 closer together, have one that's a little bit off to the side, just to kind of break the rhythm up a little bit. It can actually, even though you have the same number of characters in the scene, what it would do is actually give a feel that there's more people there, in a sense. It's a little bit too evenly spaced apart. Of course, I'm going to pick on little trivial things. Of course, I'm not going to.
That's why I called upon you, because you'll see the thing. Like I was maybe thinking that, but I didn't notice it. Like I wouldn't have said that.
I'm coming from an animator's perspective, because I came from animation, so tempo and rhythm and spacing is something that, we're always very picky about stuff like that. The character off on the left, the guy who you see him a bit on a 3/4 profile, that guy, I wouldn't necessarily have him hug the edge of the screen like that.
Yeah, it's a little too. Yeah, kissing the edge there, as they say.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tangent with the side of this. Like I would move
like
it in a little bit. Or
the horn just seems it was like crammed in.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It makes it feel a bit stuffy on the left side. Where if you see the guy on the right, you have a bit of the profile of the face, and then next to that, you have a clear silhouette.
I like that a lot, actually.
Second to the right. Do you see what I mean? So it breathes a little bit better. It kind of fits into the scene a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
What I would either do on the guy on the left is either have him intersect, like I would intersect him right halfway through the screen, although that could create a bit of a redundancy with the right. You don't necessarily want to mirror an image on both sides. I would either intersect him or I'd move him in slightly. I would do one of those two things.
Pretty easy fixes, and it could do a lot.
Oh, sure. Just shift it over, If he's cut off, you just have to fill it in a little bit. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of narrative, in terms of the actual story going on, I'm asking myself, what are the most important parts of this piece? So I'm thinking it's definitely this woman who's about to do some kind of a sacrifice, or she's calling on her gods or whatever the case might be. I might want her, in terms of color, perhaps, to stand out a little bit more. The contrast is nice, and her placement is perfect. It's perfect placement for this particular scene. But I would make sure that she's really isolated. Hold on just a second, Tyler. I've got a truck going by, so I'm going to close my window.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, maybe some more colors on there, like ceremonial colors that could make the character just pop even one step further.
Yeah.
Or like a pattern.
You would want something that harmonizes with the rest of the scene. You don't want to kill it because there's a nice color harmony going on. But maybe, let's say, you could grab a color that was close to that orb she's holding in her hand, or something like that, to make her unique to the rest of the scene. Because from a distance, I might not notice her. You want to be able to look at this in a thumbnail and say, okay, I can see she's the main character.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas with the yellows, the reflective light from the fire below makes her blend a little bit in with that fire. Now, one of the tricks you might be able to do in this particular case is you have the fire below, and it would catch her, but it wouldn't necessarily catch the wall behind her so much.
That's true.
Or maybe you could off that color slightly, cool it down a little bit, so that it creates a nice silhouette with the cliff, her, and into the fire.
That's
right?
true. If it was the wall right around there was a bit cooler, to pop even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too, because if you're thinking in terms of storytelling, that sacrificial altar she's got behind her with the dead deer or something like that on it, that's an important storytelling element right there.
Yeah.
But I didn't notice it because the color of the deer blends in a little bit too much with the altar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also there's a bit of a tangent with her, right? So what I would be tempted to do is shift it over and maybe slightly alter the color of that, the color of the altar,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can actually see that deer. You can see that there's a dead animal on it, because that deer is what's telling the story of what's going to happen next, right?
That's true.
Because there's a murder about to happen, or there's a murder that has happened. There's a sinister side to that dead deer. So I would push that narrative a little bit more, along with the executioner, of course. What else would I say here? I think, okay. And another thing in terms of color is I would loosen up a little bit with the color. Like if you're looking, for instance, on the helmet of this of the guy up over here on the
left, right. Either
right
or.
Right and left.
Mm-hmm.
In the dark and in the light.
It gets really harsh.
it's you have that strong blue,
Yeah.
but it's a little bit too much of a uniform blue, right? And what you can do, you can play around. Very often when you're thinking artistic, like when people are painting, you get caught up with what's happening inside the frame.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to remind yourself, something I have to do all the time is remind myself that the image continues outside of this frame. So you can have bounce light and reflective light. You can have things, an interaction of color and light that's happening on these characters that doesn't need to be justified by something inside the scene. Right?
I noticed that a lot, actually, that you mentioned it, when I took some, screen captures of, like, movie stills from, like, The Hobbit or something. They always are doing that.
Yeah, like you'll have a forest and there's a let's say a beautiful shadow or a light that's hitting across the floor, across the ground, but it's not coming from anything that's necessarily in the scene. It's a powerful thing to think about, to bring things into your image from the outside, because what it suggests is that there's more going on outside the frame. It actually expands your image without actually expanding your image.
Absolutely.
Right? It adds more. It can add more of a narrative to it. It can add more color. It gives you an excuse to add and break apart colors. And what I'm thinking on the helmet, like these guys in the foreground in blue, I would dance around a little bit with color, get a little bit loose with it, splash something in there to give it energy. Because if you think about real life, if you look at anything in real life, it's almost never a uniform color. It's always a bounce of color and light, right?
Yep.
There's always a nice, and when you do that, what it actually does is it can take an image like this, and just by splashing in a little bit of color, of course, being sensitive to the values and the color scheme you've got going on, but maybe
like I could definitely see some like greens and purples, like kind of bouncing around in there.
Oh, absolutely!
Like right here, see, there's like a slight hint of it even right here from the fire, but it helps a lot.
Well, you see that. Look at that helmet next to him. Okay, the one that you just pointed at, it's a perfect example because that one has a little bit more of a play of color.
Yep.
And you see that it has a much more organic, believable feel to it. Whereas if you compare it to the one to the right, because there's so much of it caught in this flat shadow, it actually flattens the image.
That's true. Because so much of the bottom part or quarter of this image here is just flattened by the dark shadow there. You could definitely play a bit with that.
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, you got to think in terms of value, right? So when I tell this to my students, sometimes I'll say, play around the color, but I have to specify, play with the color within that same value range, because if you don't,
yes,
what's going to happen is you're going to lose control of your values, and you're going to kill this beautiful sense of depth.
It's going to look muddy.
Yeah, so grab like if you're playing in Photoshop, an easy way of doing it in Photoshop is just to move your hue slider, but leave your value alone, right?
Maybe I can actually show that, like if it's
sure. Go
well,
for
actually, the color slider is completely hidden, but yeah, here we go. It's really close, but what we mean is you can go up like a little bit, just nudge it, and even bounce around slightly, and it will give it a. See, I can't even tell the difference.
You can't visually necessarily.
Yeah, that's right. Because I am making marks just to confirm it.
Feel the difference.
Yeah, I am making marks. I didn't even. But there's slight differences.
Yeah, and even depending on how you go about it, I mean, this isn't necessarily an abstract painting, right? But an artist that I very often reference who really.
Oh, I figured out the issue. Sorry, it was on multiply mode.
Oh, okay.
That's why you can't see anything. Yeah. See, now we can actually see a little bit of color going around.
Yeah, and you can be loose with that. Like when it comes to color, what I tell my students all the time is, be brave with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's better to go too much at first and then scale back in the end if you need to.
Absolutely. And if you go back into grayscale, what I always do is like I'll do a select all, and then I'll do a Control Shift C, Control Shift V, like a copy paste merged, and then I do Control Shift U. So my fingers, my pinky and my ring finger always stay on the Control and Shift, and I just do CVU. Mm-hmm. And that way I can immediately look at it in grayscale and say, okay, did I ruin something? And even what you're doing here, what you can even do is you can bring that value down so it matches the blue that you have there, so you're not losing that nice silhouette, right?
Yeah.
But even though it's such a subtle variation in color, even though your eyes might not immediately notice it, emotionally you do notice it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're staying within the same color range, but you're feeling that you're actually looking at a living object rather than something that's just a flat two-dimensional color, right?
Mm-hmm.
See how that just
it helps a
lot
lot
of energy to it, right? Yeah.
Very subtle. All right, let's move on to the next one. We could probably talk about this great image for a while, right?
I could talk about this all day. It's awesome.
Let's do this one going across the top.
Okay.
This is I think a much more literal version of the initial brief I mocked up there. So yeah, I like this one a lot.
Yeah, very nice. Composition, fantastic.
Right, and can I mention that while we're on it? It's like sometimes it's like appropriate to have a center-based composition, and other times it's just not as appropriate. Would you want to elaborate when you think would be a good or a bad time to approach that?
I don't think there's a good or bad. I mean, if you're thinking in terms of storytelling, there are certain quick guidelines you can follow in terms of composition, right? You can say, for instance, if I want to create a sense of scale, I'll like if I want to create a sense of scale, then I'll always have a point of comparison, right? So you have these small zombies or Draugr or something like that, and you have this large skull cave type of thing, this kind of shrine going on, right? So you see that scale comparison and stuff like that. But in terms of composition, my personal opinion is, I've followed the rule of thirds, and I've played with different types of standard forms of composition, but composition to me is very much like any other type of art, or any other practice in art. Use it intuitively. Go with your feeling, right? A composition is the guidelines to a composition are quick tips to avoid making silly mistakes, like having your focal point hugging the side or something like that. You want to keep things somewhat centralized. But when you're playing with a composition, don't be afraid to be experimental. I have some certain compositions that if I was to follow the rule book, it would be considered, a big faux pas, but it works. It just works.
This really works here.
It does. And the fact that it's centralized, well, it's a very centralized piece. There's a single focal point, right? Yep. And everything is pulling your eye towards this middle shrine. And so the use of color and value and placement, in my opinion, is fantastic. I like the fact that as far as the pillars are concerned, this kind of stone pillars that go up on either side of the shrine, that they're slightly off-sized. There's you see how the rhythm's been a little bit broken up, so it creates a little bit more visual variety. It doesn't feel too redundant.
Yeah, and the background's asymmetrical as well.
Yeah, for instance, that waterfall in the background actually is a very important part of this piece because it breaks the mirror effect of this composition. It knocks everything off to the side a little bit, which helps create an imbalance, which is necessary. It is. Right? Without that, if you took that waterfall out, I guarantee you'd probably have something that felt a lot less energetic.
Yeah, it would definitely be a lot more stiff.
Now, as far as critique is concerned, the first thing that I noticed was saturation. That there was, this is how I very often describe it. I am always comparing it to other things, and one of the things I noticed that visual arts compares to is dance, okay, or music. Music is a very good way to describe it. One of the teachers that I work with described color this way to me, and he really helped set my head on the right track. He said, when you're listening to a song, okay, when you're listening to a song that you like, or you're playing a song on the guitar or something like that, if you're listening to if I'm listening to my kid's one of his toys that plays that obnoxious repetitive music. Yeah, that you hear over and over. Yeah. If I had any hair left, of course. But it's what makes a song boring to listen to is when the tempo is the same all the time. Bop, 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 right? It's just at a certain point you go numb, right? You tone it out. you need to play with the tempo of color and value and all of these things in a way that allows your eyes to take a break from one thing and then enjoy something else. And you can go back and forth in a piece. So if you're listening to a song and instead of going bop, 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 it goes bop, ba-da, bop, rap, dop, dop, bop, bop, ba-da, bop, bop. Because there's that visual variety, you're always excited. You're always interested in it. It's not numbing your brain, right? It's not too high adrenaline. And color's the same way. Color is, in my opinion, it's a gentle build-up to a big statement. And the big statement in this particular piece is that shrine. It's that flaming mouth of the shrine,
center.
Right? So by taking the saturation down and only adding important accents of saturation. And what I mean by down is you could take that saturation almost down to a gray, right?
Yeah, I can do that right here.
Yeah, take it all the way down, okay? Now already, even though we don't have any punch yet, we don't have any statement or main narrative with the color, already I feel like I'm looking at something that's a lot more natural. I don't feel like I'm staring at a bright, juicy color too much. If there's too much of a certain color, then what it does is it numbs you. A good comparison is if you go to the hospital and you just, God forbid this ever happened to you, and you sliced your leg open and there was blood everywhere. And you're in a panicky mode and you're in the ambulance and, you're covered in blood and you're in pain and everything. And then you go into a hospital and all of the nurses and doctors are dressed in red. How is that going to make you feel? It's not going to help you psychologically, right? If you go in and you see red, that aggressive red color is going added on to your already bloody, painful state is going to be kind of an emotional overload, right?
Yeah.
So that's why doctors wear turquoise, green, they wear soft, cool colors to balance it, right? Because you've been exposed to a lot of red at that point. Hopefully not. Hopefully it was just a headache. But what you're doing here is you're calming everything down and then you're creating a statement with that color. And you can dance with that statement.
It's really easy to play with and go tone it down and, amp it up where you think it might help too. So with
absolutely. Yeah.
With Photoshop and layers, it's super easy. But yeah, I can see that's just a lot more powerful now because it's not quite as all in your face too.
Yeah, and think about how strong that statement is right now with that the opening of the cave, and the rest of the cave is only there to add texture and add an environment to the main story, to the main narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the shrine. And you can, if you wanted to dance around, you could add a few, I don't know. This is more of this is a bit more of a darker theme, but you could have a few little fireflies or something like that, some ambient critters that are floating around, something that has maybe a bit of that orange.
It looks like you got the little wisps in there. That helps too.
You could, see that? Use those wisps to break up that orange so it's not all localized in only one place. You can have a couple of them catching a bit of a yellow or an orange. So the color's slightly off from that, right?
Yeah, a little magenta in there wouldn't hurt either.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, you can play with color, right? This is what, at this particular point in the painting, I would call this the base. I have the story. I know the painting is strong. The drawing side of this is very strong. And you've set a very good base. And at this point, I can come in and I can just start splashing around some colors very subtly. I don't have to go all
picking out some of the greens.
Yeah, exactly.
Highlights.
Like the green of the bush. If we look just to the right of that shrine, right where the four guys are standing there, that little bush on the ground, add a few oranges, add a few reds. Look in nature. Actually go outside and look at nature. And when I have a little path in the back of my house that I always walk up and down. And it's like almost like being in the forest, even though I'm in the middle of the city, right? It's like a forest path. And when you actually stop and look at the grass and look at flowers and look at not only the colors, but the variety of different types of plants that you're going to find in one, square foot. If you actually look at the ground and you look at the bushes and you look at the grass, there's like 12 different plants. There's little yellow flowers, pink flowers. There's green leaves. There's jagged yellow leaves. There's orange leaves. The grass is like 10 different colors. The grass isn't green. Grass is yellow and orange and a little bit of magenta and some blue. And when you realize that, and you go back to painting shrubbery, right?
Yep.
And you don't paint it as a single uniform color, all of a sudden that bush looks like a bush. It doesn't look like a green mass, right? Once you've actually seen the difference between what the actual colors of nature are and what you're painting, you realize, geez, I'm thinking too much like a cartoonist.
Yeah, where they simplify everything down to like the basics.
Exactly. Exactly. So just by playing around and breaking up these colors in the rock is it's an orchestra of color. It's because it's reflective, because it's organic. You get different types of age and different types of wear and different minerals that go into these rocks. You get little bits of red, little bits of gray, little bits of blue, little bits of green. It's all mixed in, right? And immediately this image that looked more like a kind of like at the beginning, as we have it now, it starts off looking like something that could go in an animated film, like a 2D animated film.
Yeah,
by the
definitely.
time you're finished, it looks like a real living piece of concept art of an environment that you could really immerse yourself in. Rather than just looking at an image of an event, you actually feel that visceral immersion into the image because your eyes have so much to enjoy. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, your eyes are really feeling this very elaborate environment. And all it took was maybe an extra 20, 30 minutes, just dance around and add some color to the environment.
Just a little splash of color.
Exactly. And to give this depth as well, you can exaggerate the values as well. So for instance, you see that if we compare that up on the top left, that rocky piece that kind of cuts the corner, if we were to take that value down even further, and then in the background behind that shrine, I would add a filter, like maybe I can put a layer. I would put a layer with like where I take the opacity down, and I would fade it almost off to a soft blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything all of a sudden will push really far into the back and pull really close to the front, and you'll get that real strong tension of depth in the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a strong piece, though. I love the design of it.
Yeah,
it's
really beautiful,
phenomenal. Let's jump to another
just
one.
to mention something, Tyler, as well. If I have a lot of critique, it's because there's a lot to say. It means there's a lot going on. When I look at something and I go, I don't know what to tell you, it's because there's not enough information to go by. So the more I critique it, that's what I tell my students. The more I complain about your piece of artwork, the better it is.
That's another reason why I wanted you on here, because I did the first one and I was not nearly as thoughtful. I had a lot to say, but I'm just bad at talking about art. I've never been good at it. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this.
I've always seen that. Yeah.
That's why I wanted to do this as well, to help myself observe critiquing art and getting better at it as. So let's talk about this one. This is I think more of like more in line of a traditional illustration and more like a piece of a concept, but yeah, I like what's going on here.
I do too, and I think that in this one, what really jumped out, the first thing that jumped out at me is that, and this is something I actually need to work more in my work. I find that this is something that that I need to get more playful with, and it's that whoever painted this is very brave with composition. It's very dynamic,
Yeah.
Knocking everything over to the side, the direction of the cloth and the patterns in the floor and this almost fisheye lens kind of exaggerated perspective. It's very powerful. And the other thing I like about this is it's very, as far as color and rendering, it has a very classic painting feel.
Yeah, it's like classic like D&D like fantasy illustration right here.
That's exactly. I wanted to go and get my D&D books out again after seeing this. I was like, oh God, I missed that. I love this. I really love this piece. Now, what I'm thinking in terms of, the first thing that jumps out at me, especially if you put it in the context of all the paintings we see here in the image, contrast. By adding some contrast to this piece and adding a little bit of depth, not everywhere. Just like for instance,
that's just the slight auto contrast, and it helps a lot too.
Yeah, it adds that depth because with the lack of contrast, it flattens the image a little bit too much. So, for instance, but to me, I wouldn't necessarily want to contrast the whole thing. I think you have a very, very good base to add some strong focal points of contrast in an artistic way, rather than just thinking, well, I just need to add ambient occlusion to the whole thing and, to help things pop. What I would say is add contrast as a storyteller, artistically, where you just add it where you need it. So, for instance, your main area, your one of the main focal points is that dragon head that's popping out of the doorway. I would add some depth and some. I would lower the value around that at that opening where the dragon's head is coming out.
Yeah, you got a little bit more darker, and then even some like specular highlights on the scales of the dragon's face would really make that guy look menacing and pop out.
And just picture, exactly, and picture how visually powerful it will be to have this painting that's overall very muted in terms of contrast, but have this dragon head that just jumps out of the page at you. That could be very powerful. If you went too everywhere with the contrast and added it everywhere, it becomes a little bit too generic, right? But by doing that, you're really making this one part of that image just leap out at you, and that can create something that's very original. Because this piece, in terms of style and in terms of approach, is very original. I really like it.
I do. I love this type of stuff more than a lot of the photo bashed, like hyper realistic in areas. Like this is just, they got a nice kind of style to it. And it just takes you back.
Yeah, it's got a very classic feel to it. I love it, and I like the fact that from a storyteller's perspective, that you have that person who's slumped over on the top left. Are we seeing the whole image, or are you zooming?
That is the whole image.
Okay, the fact that we just see the hand.
Yeah, right? Like over the chopping block, like
over the chopping block. It's showing this. Whoever painted this took advantage of the what's happening outside of the image practice nicely. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
I really like that.
Brilliant.
One thing that's bugging me a little bit about this painting is because that main character, the guy who's chained to the floor, because he's such a focal point, I would do a few little tweaks to his anatomy, okay? Like in terms of his shoulder, his angle of his body, his upper body is a little bit off. I think the perspective of his shoulders is a little bit off in terms of the...
yeah, it looks like that right one should be a bit higher. It should be higher, in line with the floor, so to speak, to kind of go up and then be like up here.
If you're going to buy, this is something that very often happens, and it's such a common mistake that I do this all the time. This is always the mistake that I'm fixing in my paintings. That's why I always notice it when other people do it too. You have to be, when it comes to posing a character, and a very good example of somebody who does this, because this is probably an artist that has inspired these works, is Frank Frazetta.
Yeah.
What he does is, if he's posing a character, he's always conscious of the shoulder line and the hips, right, to get the perspective of the body, right? He doesn't flirt with the perspective. He either matches it perfectly or he breaks it with the body. So, like, if I put that in the context of this character, I would either have his shoulders aligned perfectly with the perspective we have going on in the image, or I would pose his body so he's completely twisted off of it. So you're not thinking, is that off or not?
Yeah, I know. I see what you're saying.
What I would do is, for instance, the shoulder that we see closest to us, I would twist his body, okay, to add a bit more dynamic to his upper body to show that he's kind of exhausted and slumped over. And the shoulder that's further away from us, I would slump it down. So it's actually, he's turning his body so that shoulder we see that's closer to us is actually facing the camera more, right? Yeah. And that way you kind of get that dramatic twist in the spine, which really adds a lot of energy to these types of paintings, right? That kind of thing, so that you're not your mind isn't trying to figure out if it's accurate or not, if the perspective of the anatomy is accurate or not. You're kind of like, you can very clearly tell that the body is either turned or it's straight, right?
Yep.
But apart from that, man, I don't think there's a whole lot else I can say about this. I think it's pretty.
That one's really good.
Piece of work, yeah.
Let's go with this one.
Oh, wow.
The Dragon Isle.
Holy shit.
Love it. It's such a cool idea.
Oh, that's beautiful.
He added this kind of sphere part in the middle last minute off some feedback in the group, I think maybe, but I don't know. I think it adds a real lot to it and originality too.
I love it. Well, that to me is what really sells the whole fantasy side of this.
Yeah.
The fact that it kind of defies gravity, I think that's fantastic. Oh, and it's like a dragon's mouth. I see what's going on.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's definitely like the Dragon Isle concept, like taken like the furthest. It's awesome.
That is fantastic. Oh, well, if you painted this, then 2 thumbs up, man. This is really nicely done. Original is all hell. Beautiful rendering. This actually reminds me of an artist that I've seen on the page. He's got about 850,000 likes on his artwork. It has that same beautiful attention, beautiful, like very ambient rendering of his work.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it too. It's got that very kind of like delicate, painted by hand feel to it.
There's only a few things I would critique about this, and they're very, very subtle things. Atmosphere, because this piece is very atmospheric. The direction that this is going is, I can't wait to see where this guy or girl goes with their career, because this is just absolutely beautiful. Whoever painted this has a very strong sense of personal style, okay, and is right on the cusp of pushing this to the point where their artwork becomes famous for a purpose, right? That unique style that really makes it stand out. And what I would say would really push it to that next level is to take the atmosphere that we have going on here, that sense of atmosphere, like the blue on the inside of that mouth, that just, it gives me that sense that there's a lot of humidity in this air, right? And I would push it a little bit further. I would push it maybe 10, 15% further. Like, for instance, in the sky behind this formation, I would push the depth a little bit more, so I would add more of a blue, maybe a bit of a cyan to that sky, to help that foreground, to help bring out. It would make that dragon structure. It would make the reds pop out in that dragon structure a little bit more.
Yeah, there is very subtle hints of those as well.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, and that would really push the atmospheric depth of this piece in a beautiful way. That's the first thing. I would say just be careful with the little tangent with those clouds, because that can kind of, the cloud that meets with
right
the
up here
peak there. Yeah, I would shift it over a little bit, just so we can sense that, so we got a nice overlapping depth in the piece. The water is fantastic. I would add a little bit more color to the water. You see the attention to, you see how that structure, the dragon structure, is, there's a lot of color going on, and there's a lot of energy because of it, the blues and the reds and the yellows. I would add a little bit more color to that water, especially the water that's around the same distance. It's around the same distance. The boat.
Like, you could show the depth around the base of it too by getting, with the darker and really deep blues in there, and then you could show basically subtle bits of it being submerged under the water.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also have reflection, right? You have reflective color coming from that structure as well. And I think the boat needs to be a little bit more atmosphere on that boat. Like the color is, it feels a little bit too
cut and pasted
on,
right?
And just by adding a little bit of that atmospheric blue to the boat, it'll help it blend in and feel more natural, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The only last thing I would say is the magnificent sense of scale of this structure. To push it, make that boat about 70% smaller. Don't be afraid to have a tiny little boat sitting there, because artists do that all the time. If you have a strong silhouette to that boat, you'll be able to tell that it's a boat.
Yeah.
And bring that scale down so that it's, let's say, you see those
Make this look even larger.
Yeah.
It look magnificent.
It would make that structure humongous, right? Whereas if we compare it now, it's big, but it's not awe-striking big. It's not awesomely big, all right?
Yeah.
And that's what would really make this piece go, wow. That would take this painting from being, wow, that's beautiful, to being, holy shit.
Shit's epic.
It's epic, right? That's what that boat would make all the difference, just by scaling it down a little bit. Push the atmosphere, push the depth, add a little bit of cyan to the background, add a little bit more color in the water, play around with some reflective light, and scale that boat down, and it's going to make people
quite a portfolio piece right here.
Yeah.
I think this is a kicker too. I think the artist that made this is like 17 or 18.
Okay, well, if the artist is listening to this, I no longer like you.
Right, there goes our jobs down the road.
Yeah, no, forget that. If you're that good at 17, then I better work harder. That's all I gotta say.
I think I was like doodling in high school notebooks with color pencils at that age, and that was it.
Jesus, man! Wow, 17 years old. That's insane.
Yeah. Let's this one's here. Let's talk about this one.
Oh my god.
The temple.
I keep getting knocked on my butt. Well, technically solid as hell. Composition, I don't have a damn thing to say.
Yeah, it's really good.
Maybe the little leaf, the leaf that's creating a tangent with the temple.
It's a great use of texture and rendering too.
Oh, fantastic! This is just fantastic. I mean,
like that person, you could tell, does not want to be on the stake right there, getting dragged into this.
Yeah.
Temple of Doom.
What do I say? There's not a whole lot to say here. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. Again, I would just maybe push some of the colors a little bit further in some of these areas. Like, you could get a little bit more adventurous with them, as you said, like right around where the sun is hitting here, maybe some cooler shadows. Just, you know, color variety, I guess.
Color, I think, because the main, at the beginning, what I saw was that temple, right?
Yeah.
Because, as you can tell, if we put this in grayscale, you can immediately see that the highest point of contrast, the darkest darks next to the lightest lights, are at the entrance of that doorway. So my eyes immediately pulled there. However, the characters, the story of these people being pulled to this temple, I actually didn't even see at first. I didn't notice until you mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely add more contrast to those characters. Definitely add more contrast. And again, you can bring in light from somewhere else. You can have light shining through those trees, cutting across that bridge, that wooden bridge, the fallen tree bridge, and have it catch off of their backs or their shoulders. Okay, and have light hit them, creating a focal point. If, of course, that's what your intention is. If you want them to, if you're thinking in terms of storytelling, you don't necessarily, depending on how you paint and depending on the type of storytelling that you tell, you don't necessarily want people
all the attention there.
You want maybe people to look at the painting and go, oh, wow, look at the temple, and then they look and they see, oh, wait a minute, there's people there. Oh my God! Like a hidden narrative, right?
Yeah, like an alternate approach to that would be to like simplify and lighten up the tree area around them, maybe with some light coming in, and then just have the characters in silhouette form, kind of.
Exactly, right? Narrative doesn't mean, when people say narrative, yes. If you're thinking in production, if you're thinking in terms of production, right? If you're working in a studio. The rule is you want a 2-second read. You want people to look at it and go, oh, I know exactly what's going on immediately, right?
Yep.
Because when you're looking at a book cover or you're looking at a cover for a video game or an illustration or a piece of design work or something like that, people are flipping through images on the net one after the next, and you want to catch attention quick. In that particular case, you want your narrative to jump out. In that case, you would need to add contrast to those characters. And add some light coming through, or you could either lighten or darken the area behind it to make them pop more, right? Mm-hmm. You might want to mute out areas that are less important by putting them in the shadow type of thing, right? That type of idea, right? But I think that, to me, is that if I was thinking in terms of production, I would say those characters need to pop out definitely more.
Yeah,
right?
Just a
As
little
we
bit.
see them right now, they almost get lost in the background, right?
That's true.
And what is that thing and I just noticed that there was a dragon.
Yeah, and there's a dragon waiting them.
Okay, I didn't see that at first. Yeah, that dragon would if the dragon is important, you definitely want to push the contrast on that dragon, have some light let's say some light hitting his face, creating catching some yellowish orange highlights on his scales on his face and arm type of idea, or catching off of his wing. You add some more contrast on the inside of it, like the space between his arm and his face. You want to add a little bit more of, say, of a very dark value, almost a black type of thing, to really make your eyes pull there. It helps define that silhouette, because I actually didn't see that was a dragon at first.
Yeah, he kind of comes at you there.
Yeah,
you could have the rest of him almost read in silhouette and kind of come into the light where his face and maybe some of his claws are, and then you can just catch the tail wrapping around as well.
Exactly.
So, and then, of course, simplify, the area around anything you want the attention to be immediately drawn to.
Exactly. Yeah. You choose your texture. You choose your texture as you wish. Like one of the things, if you think in terms of focal points and drawing the eye, one of the things that what actually drew my eye in to see that those characters were there was the texture on the wood that they're standing on, because the texture has a higher contrast there than it does closer to the staircase.
Yeah.
So my eyes immediately pulled towards that part of the tree, right? And compositionally, because I have that tree bridge, my eyes were immediately looking to what's going on there, right? Mm-hmm. But I need to see those characters. That's pretty much the thing, And the only main thing, too, technically, is that leaf up on the top right, on the top right of the image, is touching. It's creating a tangent.
Oh, yes, right here. I didn't notice that at first.
Well. And what that'll do is you could overlap it, create a very clear overlap, or separate it.
Yeah, just not
and
touching.
The tree on the left side's doing the same thing too. Like the little trees in the background are touching the left of the temple. I would move those out of the way to create a nice, clean, clear silhouette of that temple, so that we see the temple more clearly. And
it'll also make it look higher up as well.
Yeah.
Like if you, what is it? Let me see if I can grab a brush. Like erasing this part of it.
Yeah.
Just bring the tree level down, basically.
And that temple jumps up at you. Exactly.
Well, have it glowing.
How'd you make that one?
Great piece.
I get frustrated watching you work because you're painting. I have all your tutorials right, and I'm watching your painting. I'm like, you make that look so damn easy, and then I try to do it on mine. I'm like, yeah, no, that'll take another 6 years for me to pull that off. No.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
For all of us, it's not easy. No matter it doesn't seem to get easier. I don't know.
Yeah.
I get smarter about things, but still, then it's just about taking your work further, and it's always constantly improving. And this one's a bit different. We got a sweet vertical composition and a lot going on.
Holy shit! Okay.
Yeah, can't even fit it all in the window.
Okay, well, first thing I would say is that this artist has a lot more patience than I do. This off.
Coming from the guy that spent 6 months on one painting, right?
Yeah, no shit. Well, right off the bat, wherever you are listening to this, your style, do not ever lose sight of the skill you already have and the style you already have. I absolutely love this. This reminds me very much of Disney concept art.
I thought of some Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah.
That's what I thought of.
It's very loose. It's got a beautiful sense of style and originality. I'm just, wow. What can I tell you? I don't know what to tell you. What's her name? I actually just saw a documentary on that famous Disney artist. What the hell was her name again? Mary Blair.
I'm not actually familiar with her.
Yeah, Mary Blair should have been one of the. She is probably one of the most influential Disney artists. She was one of the original concept artists for Alice in Wonderland, for instance, right? And her style is very, very well known. She kind of had a very flat two-dimensional style where she could capture an entire scene in a single image. It was just remarkable. And this actually, although your rendering is different, that you have that genius headspace in terms of texture and style and color and atmosphere. It's picturesque, but at the same time, it's an immersive scene. And to that, hats off to you. You know, whoever did this, I really think this is brilliant. Let me think here. Now, because there's so much going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to look at first. Besides, I think my eye is drawn up here, just because it's the hierarchy of it.
Absolutely. Now I'm thinking to myself, I have to be careful with how I critique this, because I'm thinking to myself, there is a style I don't want to kill. I don't want to lead. Right. I don't want to lead the artist off in a direction that's going to kill the brilliance of this piece. However, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how you've used value in this piece. The fact that this feels flat because the values are so close throughout the entire piece. When you do that, it totally looks like a two-dimensional image, right?
Right.
Is a style. Now, if you're doing this consciously, brilliant. Okay? If you didn't really consider the value range, what I mean by value is the things that are closer to you, like
anything up in here.
Yeah, all of those structures that cut across horizontally. If your intention was to do this, I think that's an absolutely brilliant thing that you've done, and I love it. If it's not intentional, if you really want to create an incredible sense of depth in this piece, because you have so much depth, you have a character way up in the foreground, and then you can look way off into the mountain peak. If you were to add more contrast and lower the value of those objects in the foreground, your entire image would literally, you would pull your eye.
Yeah, like I'm thinking anywhere, all the foreground stuff, including
all of that.
Yeah, and then just take out the holes where.
Yeah, even the bushes on the side, even the leaves on the side, because they look like they're a part of the same structure as well. Take all that in and just take the curves down or whatever.
Yeah, easily just start creating a lot of depth to it.
Now that you've done that, now you've got a second opportunity to play with light, right? Because now you've got that sense of depth. Now your eye is really pulling up towards the upside. Now you can have light shining in through that space between the buildings, hitting, let's say, off of that main character, hitting off of his hat and shoulders in the foreground, that kind of Asian Viking type of character there.
Look at that, I had this cropped out the whole time. There's this whole bit going down here. I didn't realize that. It's so long. It's going to be a wall scroll.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, well then you have two focal points.
Yeah, you got one at the top and bottom.
You have a light source coming at the bottom there through that tunnel. You've got a light source coming from the top as well, and you can use that as an opportunity. You have three different sources of light that are all three different temperatures. You have a cyan light, a cyan type of magenta soft light coming up from the top. You've got the warm sunlight coming from the bottom, although that wouldn't make any sense, right? Because you can't have sunlight coming from two different places. But you'd have that. Let's say that was a hall, like a meeting hall type of thing. If we were to look down the center to that kind of room at the bottom, let's say that was like a dining hall or a meeting hall, a ceremonial place, then you could have a synthetic light coming in from there, and then you've got the warm lantern light coming in. So you've got three different light sources. Think about how much color and light you can play around with that. The cyan, let's say, like a magenta turquoise type of light that would come from the bottom, and then you'd have that warm light coming from the lanterns, and they're all playing on these characters.
Yeah, these would be you could have some interesting REM light going on with them. There's a little indication of that here.
Yeah.
But there's a lot, going on. This person's, looks like they put a real lot of thought into this.
Yeah, there's so much.
Monkeys running across.
Yeah. And as a play of color, for instance, if you want to play around and get really deep with the color. For me, one of the things I love to use to use as an excuse to splash in beautiful color is subsurface scattering. So, for instance, that little just to the left of the main character there on the bottom, there's this kind of little spiky shrub. If you had a little bit of an orangey subsurface light that shine through some of those leaves, for instance.
Yeah, at the top it would be.
Think about what that might, like a reddish orange that might catch that, or
Yeah, like at the top it might read.
Yeah, that type of
something like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And basically go in that direction. So if you were to try to, as a technician, I would say depth, light source, and create some contrast, like have a little bit of light hit off the top of that guy's head in the foreground if he's a main focal character, because he does occupy a lot of that image, right?
Yeah.
So that would force your eye to the foreground to see him first. Whether or not he's a storytelling piece, it forces your eye to look at him first, and then you look at the rest of the image in comparison to him, right? So he's up in your face, and now you have a point of comparison to see depth, right?
Yep.
That's what I would say. Now, before we close up on this one, there's one other thing I would mention. If, let's say, your approach was to have a very flat two-dimensional approach, which is very powerful, okay? What I would say at that point is, instead of worrying about all that contrast, I would play around a little bit more with color, right? So let's say on this guy's shirt, this guy in the foreground shirt, I would have a little play of color, a little bit of like some grays and some soft greens and stuff like that that would break up that color a little bit.
Yeah, just a little on the monochromatic side.
Exactly. And that also kind of makes him blend a little bit too much in with the background as well.
Because there's a lot of this same red going on, which ties it all in, but it won't do anything to separate the space and him.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And that doesn't kill what you've got going on. What it does is it pushes you in that same two-dimensional style, where you can still create visual focal points in images. You can still make certain characters pop out and certain blend in, depending on how you play with the colors, how they blend in with the objects behind them. You're still making them pop, but you're limiting yourself in terms of value. So you're maintaining that style you got going on. Like have a little bit of an orangey green hit off that monkey's shoulder that's up on the thing, just to make your eye jot up there. It's loose, it's playful, but there's a monkey there because something pulled your eye to him, right? That type of an idea. I hope I'm making sense, but yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
That's it. Beautiful work.
What we'll do is, since we'll talk about this one since we haven't got to this artist yet, and then we'll kind of bring up the rest of them because they're all done by the same guy. It will just kind of make one, several comments about all of them, as a whole, I guess, just to speed things up since we are running a bit late on time.
Not a problem.
So let's give this person their proper attention.
All right. Okay.
The Dragon Shrine.
I see. Like the first thing that really jumps out at me is absolutely. Here is an example for anybody who's interested in value and depth. This is a very perfect example of that.
This is how you do it.
Really understands value well. I think and composition, it's a quick read. I mean, this was probably the first image I noticed when you showed me the page of images. Mm-hmm. This is the first one that my eye drew to.
This is such a powerful statement right here with the wings.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you shrink that down to I give it a shot, shrink it down to as small as you can get right now, or even smaller than that. I can still tell what's going on in that image.
Yeah, that's the problem. Even with a lot of my images that small, I don't know what the heck's going on in mine. It just gets too busy. But that's such a simple statement right there. It's powerful.
Simple and powerful. The better you get at controlling value, the simpler your statement gets. And this person's obviously put a lot of work into studying value a lot. So that's fantastic.
Which I think is great because that's one area I think a lot of people struggle with, just as much as color, is getting those values right.
Yeah. And when you're learning one, you tend to slack off on another, and you keep having to flip your mind back and forth to make sure you're balancing everything. So, okay, well, first thing, there's two things that jump out at me in this image. The first is color, and the second is texture. It needs... In this particular case, when you're adding texture and detail, you don't have to do it everywhere. In fact, very often adding texture and detail everywhere can kill an image.
Yeah.
You have, I would say, since in my opinion, that temple, because of the composition and lighting, I would say that temple is probably the focal point. Because that's the focal point, we need more information there. When in fact, although that's the part of the image that's pulling me in, my eyes are enjoying looking at the green structure over on the left more.
Yeah.
Because it's loose, it's very loose, there's a lot of visual variety, there's highlights, there's vines. My eyes are enjoying looking at that because there's so much information going on there. Mm-hmm. And it's loose information. It's a place I can imagine myself sitting and having a sandwich, right?
Yeah, right there. Just taking a view, watching someone getting off in there, or
That's where you're gonna go with your wife on your honeymoon. There you go. So my eyes want to see that kind of information going on in that temple area. He's going to paint.
I see. I'm just going to paint us right here, enjoying it. Cool that off just a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right.
And then,
Okay, so in that temple, okay, what would I do? Well, if I'm thinking loosely, and what I mean by loosely is think in a way that's non-committal. This is something I heard from an artist that I quote all the time, Marco Bucci. I think I mentioned him before too. He's got some great stuff online in terms of color. When he was talking about abstract color, check him out. Bucci, Marco Bucci. He's a very good guy for that. And he also, one of the things he mentioned a few years ago, because he hadn't put out videos in a while, is don't overcommit to your work emotionally. Okay? And what I mean by that is it doesn't mean don't love what you do. It means don't think, I gotta get this perfect. I gotta get this perfect.
Yeah, don't put it up on a pedestal before it's done.
Exactly. Just approach it in a way like I don't give a crap if I erase it after. Just be playful. Have fun. Experiment. Throw in some colors. Throw in some splashes of color here and there. Allow the looseness of your brushstroke to capture things that you didn't expect. Add some depth here. Add this there. And when I'm looking at that temple, I'm thinking because the artist wasn't really focusing on those bushes on the left, created something that was actually a lot more interesting to look at. It was looser. It was less committal. Where that temple, they were thinking, I've got to get this temple right. The dragon wings and the head and the entrance and the peaks over the doorway. The imagination and the design is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's too emotionally tight in terms of design, though. And what I would do is I would break it up. If that's a dragon temple, I would have some of those peaks that would shoot up and maybe almost touch the chin of the dragon. I would have those wings spread out more and be more dramatic and maybe engulf the whole shape.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it right there.
Of that entrance, right? Get a little bit looser. Go a little bit all out with your design.
Get the energy up a little bit in it.
Get the energy up. Yeah, exactly. Loosen it up and have fun. That temple looks like it. Your intention might have been to make it a very majestic and intimidating looking dragon entrance, but that dragon looks a little bit more like a Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
He's a little too cute. I think somebody just rang my doorbell. I don't know. In any case, he's a little bit too cute, right? Hold on just a second. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
But yeah, I know exactly what he was saying. You can, expand on this, make it look a little bit more dominating. Not doesn't have to be menacing, but just have it be a little bit more powerful looking. Because right now it can come off as very cute and innocent.
My neighbor was checking to see if I was still alive because he heard a yell or something.
Oh.
I don't know. Yeah. So get loose. When I mean by loose is when you're drawing. This is I'm just thinking in my head right now. I'm not actually looking at anything, but when you're drawing, when you're drawing a sketch, if you draw with your fingers, you make these little tight lines. But if you draw with your whole arm, you can have a sweeping gesture right across the page.
Yeah.
Right. Well, with those dragon wings, have a sweeping gesture where the wings
like you're thinking way out here.
Boom! Just open up and have these wings that just wrap around and create a nice S curve around that entrance, right? Like it's hugging it type of idea, or have the wings open up. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that is a cool idea.
Yeah, loosen up your line. You can do the same thing with a paintbrush, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
But paint with your whole arm. And when you're doing a lot of concept, if you're in the phase before you actually start to render it and paint it, when you're just working in black and white, or you're doing little thumbnails to see how it is, work like that with long sweeping gestures. Nathan Fowkes always paints like that too. Sweeping gestures right across his page, because it creates a very loose movement, and that kind of movement is very appealing to the eyes, right? And don't be it's like dance. You know, you go to a dance club and there's all these girls and they're dancing and they've got their hands in front of their tummies and they're covering themselves, they're closed off. Well, a professional dancer knows how to open their arms all the way out to the end, right? It takes bravery. It takes courage to do that. Well, it takes courage to draw open too, right? Yeah. You have to keep pushing yourself. No, more. And that's what gives you that's what allows you to create these forms that are powerful and they have a lot of energy and sweeping gestures to it that help your eyes sweep around a page and feel it more, right? That type of idea.
Absolutely. There's a lot of potential here, though, if the artist wants to consider revisiting it. This is the foundation of a really solid concept.
Oh, this is right. What you've got going on right here is I would not abandon a painting like this.
No.
This, to me, this painting is actually very inspiring to me. Like, I see this and I can take it in 1,000 different directions because it's simplistic, but the idea is very strong, right?
You can get work the texture on the structure because it's reading well. Yeah. The form is there. Just, doll it up, make it look nice.
Exactly. It's just a question of, at this point, the concept is already a success. It's just a question of adding detail. That's it. And more detail were needed, But my eyes would want to see more detail around that dragon structure than in that structure on the left with you and your wife, right?
Yeah. You got a group of followers coming up.
Yeah. There you go.
They're burning someone here.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You could add just a whole other level of narrative to it, but a simple statement like that.
Well, are you painting a structure, or does that structure, you always have to ask yourself, not only what are you painting, why are you painting it? What's the purpose of this place?
Yeah.
If it doesn't have a purpose,
the purpose should always come first in your head. Should have a clear purpose.
It is a place for a reason. It's not just a pretty looking building, and you have to paint that reason in. You don't have to be overt about your statement, but you have to at least say, there's a reason why this place exists, and by giving it a purpose, you're giving it depth, and that helps you push the image and push the design of it to give that design purpose. Is this place intended to scare people? Is it intended to welcome people? Is it a Halloween joint? Is it a fun place where you go for a Halloween weekend type of thing? What is this place? Mm-hmm. Give it a meaning. Give it a story. Absolutely. And just by adding these characters, you've made it kind of a cultist shrine where all these followers are going to go in and kill a firstborn or something like that. Right?
Yeah. I was thinking whatever the idea of there's a really powerful ominous and light coming from the inside and
yeah,
that looks really cool. But then again, what even color you choose right here can offset the mood entirely as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's the psychology of color, right? You're not going to put a warm yellow because that makes it like a warm hearth, right? Mm-hmm. You put a green, unnatural looking color and you're thinking cauldron, you're thinking witchcraft, you're thinking sorcery, that type of idea, right? So you got to pick your colors carefully too.
All right, and for the last batch here, which are all, I'm pretty sure, based off the signature, they're all done from the same person. But so this person gets an A for effort regardless.
Yeah, no kidding.
Look at this.
Holy shit!
Right here, the last four.
I hate critiquing people that are better than me.
Right? These are just why isn't this person working for DreamWorks right now?
Yeah, and they probably are. Oh gosh.
I know. That'd be funny. Wouldn't the joke would be on us?
Yeah.
This is joining some random schmucks group.
Painted this. Oh well, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate the joke. Yeah. All right. All right. Well.
Because if this was, I saw this in the book of How to Train Your Dragon, I would have never known. This was done by someone who didn't work on the show.
I'd be surprised one bit if I saw this in the book, and we will. By the way, Tyler, we're going to see it.
Yeah, they'll come back and
very soon for sure. Okay. So
much talent here.
I'm looking for a common theme of things that just if you want to push your artwork to the next level, there's a very powerful, simplistic illustrator feel to it. It actually has a very, in certain cases, not the one on the top left, or I'd say the two on the right have a very John Howe feel to it, and I love John Howe's work. I like the very simplistic harmony of colors that you've got going on there. I think it really works.
They all have very strong color schemes.
Yeah, yet still brave, still loose. Design, composition, focal point, narrative, I don't have squat to say. I think you know what you're doing there. I have nothing to add. The color style, okay, the color style is very well trained. If you're interested in experimenting a little bit, I would say again, start being a little bit braver with color. No, not everywhere. You know who could be a very good point of reference would be Michael Kutcher. Not in terms of style, because he's got a very, very different style. I wouldn't encourage you to try to emulate him in terms of style, because it would make you lose your voice. His voice is, whenever I look at his work, I have to take a 48-hour breather from my own, because everything I paint, I feel looks like crap. But what I would say, what I noticed in some of his pieces, like he had this one kind of scarecrow pulling a wagon type of thing, and it used a very similar color scheme as the dragon in the arena thing going on at the top right. And you could actually come in certain places and add little splashes of turquoise on those skulls, like a light turquoise. You could add some different colors to those. You could break up these colors, get a little bit braver with colors. I think what I'm looking at is there's a little bit of hesitation with color. It's balanced overall. Do not lose what you've already created overall, but start to be a little bit more playful. Don't be afraid on that stalagmite or that pillar that's on the left. Don't be afraid to throw a little purple in there, a little turquoise in there.
You know, and I had the same issue when I was in my oil painting class many years ago. I was just painting everything, and it had really, like, color-wise, they were just very flat. And my painting instructor just started, like, I was painting a waterfall scene, you know, and I had like one color here for the rocks, and then I had the blue for the water. She grabbed, like, my paintbrush and started throwing in greens and purples and orange all over the place, and then she just kind of blended them to make them look nice, and it just opened my eyes entirely.
Yeah. Now, I would have a heart attack if a teacher touched my work, you know. But you're in a class anyway.
Yeah, so. The best intention.
My mother's a fine artist, and the rule she taught me when I was a kid is you never touch a student's artwork. Now, that kind of defeats the purpose of doing paintovers, right? Yeah. Which I find is a great way to learn. But that was the rule back in the day, at least. Yeah, playful with colors. And the other thing I would say is the painting needs a little bit of. I'm still looking at the bottom right, but I'm going to use that as the basis for all of these, right? Because the same brain went into making all of these. I can see the same quality that made it to all of them.
It's consistent.
A little bit of depth, like those skulls in the foreground. You know, those skulls in the foreground. I want those to jump out at me a little bit more. I want those to feel like they're right. You got to think, when you're thinking in terms of depth, those skulls are right by your eye, right? Yeah. So right by your eye. That means they might not be refined and sharply detailed. You don't want to pull too much attention to them. They can still be loosely painted to give that illusion of a bit of a focal blur, because your focal point is the midground where the dragon and the guy is, right? But you still need the contrast to tell me that that's still close to my eyes. So in the depth of the eyes, the little cracks and stuff like that, you might want a little bit more of add a little bit of ambient occlusion inside those eyes, add some depth to give that structure. And the sticks too, I would add maybe a deep blue or purple in that to help those boost the contrast. And what that's going to do is your entire somewhat desaturated background is no longer going to be just a desaturated background. It's going to be ambient depth. Right, it's going to create a sense that all that area in the background behind the pillar is actually dusty. You always have to think in terms of what kind of atmosphere is it? Is it dry? Is it damp? Are we by a waterfall? Is there a lot of greenery? That's going to affect the color and the quality of the atmosphere. And in this particular case, we're in a closed area. we're in an arena. There's a dragon and a fight going on, so there's a lot of dust being kicked around, and there's probably dry sunlight coming in, as you have caught some of the light beams going across, like diagonally from the top left to the bottom right. Mm-hmm. But I don't, because those skulls lack a bit of contrast, I don't get the overall sense of atmosphere. And just by boosting the contrast there, all of a sudden, my brain goes, oh, okay, between those skulls and that background, there's a ton of dust in the air. And all of a sudden, my brain's going to go, ooh, depth, right? And a little bit of contrast maybe in that dragon as well. Although, if you were looking at it in grayscale, you'd probably find overall that dragon is a little bit too neutral in terms of contrast. It just needs a little bit of contrast there. And again, color. That the color's a little bit too uniform here. He needs a little bit of you can have some bounce light.
That's what I the exact same I told him on the forum there, that he could, if the light is hitting this strong on the ground, he'd have a warm kind of underglow.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and you know what else you could do that would really add a lot? When you're dealing with wings, right? Bird wings, not so much because they're a little thicker, but when you're dealing with anything like bat wings, something that's made of skin, for instance, could be subsurface scattering. How the light shine through those wings. I'm
personally terrible at that, but yeah, that's exactly, you'd see the like when you're holding your finger up to some light.
Exactly.
You'll kind of see it.
Yeah, what I would go with there, because the light is actually perfectly angled to hit him right off the top of that wing that you're painting. A quick rule is pick the local color, warm it up and brighten it. Because what happens when the light particles hit a surface and they travel through, they bounce around and create heat, so that color heats up. Mm-hmm. So you just have to pick the local color and warm it up, push it towards the reds a little bit, and boost the saturation value. You can boost it even higher than that, by the way.
Yeah, something. Yeah, you're right. That I'm starting to hit it. I'm getting in the ballpark anyway.
There you go, perfect. Okay. And what you're doing is you're showing the audience that those wings are actually skin. It's pulled skin between these bones, between these fingers. Wings are like hands, right? Mm-hmm. If we were to hold our arms up to the side and bend our wrists down, that's a bird's wings. And if we spray it on fingers, those are our fingers. So essentially, all those little bones going through his hand, those are actually fingers, right? Yep. And treat it like fingers. And there you go. Now we can sense that. We can sense the light better. We have a play of color. We notice the dragon more, and we can sense that skin is actually transparent skin. There's light, there's translucency, there's light going through it, right?
Absolutely. It just brings the creature as a whole like a lot more alive and believable too.
Yeah. And that's the only thing I would say there, and only one other little critique that I can see on the left, although I think that one is absolutely...
Which one?
One of the spiral staircase with the candles, with the torches or candles.
Yes, this one.
Nope, not that one.
This one?
That one.
No, this one.
That one there, yeah, perfect. Yeah, this one here. The focal point. Yeah, this is my only critique because color, depth, all of those things, 100%. You got a gold star for that. The only thing is that the path, what you were doing was illuminating the path to draw your eye towards the main characters. But because we have that red saturation throughout the entire path, I don't know. It took me about 10 seconds to go,
find the right end of it,
right? Guys up there. I would probably I would only have that bright orange light hitting in that area where the characters are, because that's where my eyes are going to pull. Mm-hmm. And I would take it down, if not almost completely remove all the reds in the rest of that pathway, because that kind of creates it's directing my eye to an area that doesn't have any specific information. So I'm kind of sitting there going, not sure what to make of that. Maybe a little bit, because you do have light there, so you need a little bit of a light hitting there, but then have the strongest light hitting off the top, and that really A, stylizes your light, B, pushes your focal point a lot better, right? Mm-hmm. And that's it. But apart from that, I wouldn't say a bloody thing about that.
All right, let's say we can have one on our wall. Like, which one would you pick?
Of the ones
out of the whole batch here, our winner. What's your favorite anyway?
Oh, that's not very nice of you to ask me, Tyler.
I'll tell you where I'm at then, and we'll see if we can go from there.
I'll see what I can do. Okay, well, when I pick something for my wall, it's going to be my personal taste, right? Mm-hmm. The type of stuff that that I personally like, but I wouldn't say this doesn't have anything to do with the quality of these images. Shit, I would put them all on my wall, to be honest with you. I think for something that would really, really go nicely in a frame in my house with the decor I have going on would be the one up on the top right. Personally,
this one.
That one, I love atmosphere. So for me, that one really, really stands out. I'd say that one, because that one to me also feels it's more of an illustration. The other ones are more of a concept art type of thing. Which was technically what the contest is. Just keep that in mind too. I asked for a concept, so. Okay, so I say in terms of, I'd say the two ones that have the strongest sense of style. I'd say there's three. I would say the one up on the top right, I absolutely love the atmosphere and the rendering of that one. That one I could stare at forever. The vertical one, I think has some genius in it that I'm going to learn from today. Awesome. There's some designer genius in there that I really want. I want to continue seeing where that goes to. For a video game, I would love the top left one. I think that would really fit in a video game setting the best. And the second one that I would put on my wall would be the one just below it. Yeah. Simply because it has such a 1970s traditional acrylic painting concept art stuff you just don't see today anymore. Yeah. I have a real sense of nostalgia looking at that piece of artwork. That one really grabs me. It's fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, my two favorites or three favorites anyway, is that we'll narrow it down for me. It would be this one, one, and then this one. So yeah. Those are my favorite in terms of what the contest was asking for, a concept of a dragon shrine. Those I love those ones, and they're just so full of life and energy, and they nailed the idea that I asked for. So. I would make one last statement here. It's perfect. We're in a perfect context to make this statement too. When it comes to imagination, regardless, every one of these paintings kick ass. Yeah. Every one of these paintings jumped out at me and said, "Holy smokes!" I was really blown away. And I'm not the type of person to fluff, to say nice things for the sake of saying nice things. I really mean it. Okay, every one of these pieces of artwork is fantastic, but which ones am I going to remember? And remembering a piece of artwork has absolutely nothing to do with technical skill, rendering. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with imagination. The reason why that one on the top right really jumps out at me is because whoever designed this was fearless with their imagination. They didn't underestimate the power of their spontaneous thought. Oh, cool idea, paint it, right? And remember that. Don't be afraid to do something crazy, because it's the crazy that people remember, right? Absolutely. Your artistic mind's going to make sense of it. Your artistic mind's going to render it out in a way that's aesthetically beautiful, but what should precede any painting is the idea. And the idea should be carefree. Go for it. Have fun. Mm-hmm. Try something nuts. That's the stuff that people's going to remember, because there's so many fabulous artists out there. How many of them do you remember, right? There's a reason why you do, because there's something original about their work that grabbed you emotionally, right? So just remember that. All right. Well, another thing I thought of too, just all these ones on the left here, all these are done by the same guy. So in terms of being like a valuable concept artist on the team, I think I'm gonna have to give this guy props, because if he is turning, in a work day, if he's given, the producer or whatever 6 concepts per anybody else's, like, I mean, I didn't ask for more than one, but if you could just got a guy going above and beyond. All of those? Yeah, he did all these this month. Oh, this month? Okay, yeah. All this month. It was just a month-long contest, and he did all of these here. That's like half a portfolio worth of stuff. That to me that's a successful artist, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm gonna like that. From a director's perspective, because I've also worked as a director. When I see a portfolio like that, you get the job. You do get the job. It's clean. It's well thought out. It's refined. It's
And it's consistent
Minimalist
too.
in terms of its storytelling. It's not going off the handle. It's right to the point, and it's well executed. What can I tell you? You know.
Yeah, I want to name that guy the winner for this month. It was Cyril Jador. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but.
And I'll second that.
Awesome.
I'll second that. Yeah.
With an honorable mention to, I think this is Marcus's work here. A very good honorable mention to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of you guys, for everybody listening, you're on to something. You know, you're not just people that are figuring out how to paint. You're guys who have really found a voice. Every one of you, go with it. You know, the advice that you get, solicited or unsolicited, don't forget your voice, because that can make a piece of advice can make or break your career. So, you know, realize what you've already got going on and exploit that, right? Push it, because that's what's going to make you famous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, go on. Absolutely fantastic.
Awesome job, everyone. So impressed.
Yeah, really.
I'm glad I didn't enter this. I would have got my ass kicked.
Oh, I'm not me sitting here critiquing their work. I show my work.
Right?
You know.
What do we have to say?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. No, you guys know what you're doing here. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me and doing this, Adam. I really appreciate it, and you brought this to a whole other level in terms of what I did on the first one. So
I'm very happy.
We have to do this again.
Oh, call me anytime, man. It's my pleasure.
Definitely. We might have to make this a regular thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good for us. It's good for them. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. Oh, I learned a lot today too, just checking this stuff out. I'm gonna get right to my painting as soon as.
Right. I'm pumped to go for the afternoon.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Awesome, man. That's too cool. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and take care.